might think you're keeping your horse cool this summer, but what if Olympic-level experts told you that your methods might actually be putting them in danger? Well, today we expose the most common and dangerous horse cooling myths. Our guest is Emma Cornish, a 30-year equine veteran and founder of Elite Equine Care. She's a certified industry leader, a trusted VIP groom, and a panel expert for Dr. David Marlin's Animal Web. Whether you're caring for a pony or a performance athlete, this episode could save your horse's life. Emma, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Hello, thank you.
And now talk us through the cooling myths that could harm our horses, because we all have our own ideas of what we should be doing, don't we? But what are those myths that need to be busted?
So if your horse overheats and you're cooling your horse down with lots of water, there is always a really big myth about scraping them off. Actually, you don't scrape the water off. Just keep aggressively cooling them. You need to leave the water on. Scrape them off at the end once you've got that overall temperature down. So that's one really big thing, and that has been scientifically proven with the use of thermal imaging as well. To really get that core temperature down.
Isn't that unbelievable, considering we've all got a tool in our grooming kits to scrape that water off? That's, part and parcel of our grooming kits when you buy them in your local tack shop. That's what you're taught to do, isn't it? From Pony Club upwards.
It is. And, if your horse isn't hot and overheating, then there's nothing wrong with giving them a quick wash down and then scraping them off after. But if your horse is overheating and you are, trying to rapidly cool them, don't scrape the water off. The water needs to stay on. The water is taking the heat out of the muscles and out of the body.
And what else are we doing wrong?
It's making sure that there's plentiful water supply, fresh water's there all the time. We are feeding electrolytes, that we are replenishing the salts and the electrolytes that are being sweated out all the time. Simple things like that. There's plentiful shade available. It's surprising that how many horses are turned out in fields and actually the hedges aren't big enough for them to get shade at the correct time of day, or actually there aren't trees there for them to have the opportunity to put themselves in shade in the hottest parts of the day. If you bring your horses in during the day, in the hottest part of the day, actually, have you stood in your horse's stable at the hottest point of the day to see how hot it is in your horse's stable? Take a thermometer in there. Some of the stables with wooden construction are actually almost like ovens in the hottest part of the day. Generally, block and stone stables are nice and cool, but some wooden stables are really warm. So you're almost at a point of you're better off leaving your horse out if they've got shade in the hottest part of the day. So all these simple things are really easy to check.
That's another myth that I wanted to bust with you, Emma, is that it's better to bring your horse in during the day out of the heat to cool them down, but actually the stables are like boiling pots often in the midday sun. Why have sort of regimes been created like this, where it's been known that some yards will do this to cool their horses down when actually it's not necessarily the way forward?
I think people think about what they would do for themselves and then imprint that on their horses. They think that they would put themselves in their house where it's nice and cool and, they would take themselves in at lunchtime. So they think that they would put that routine onto their horse. But actually the horse's housing isn't necessarily as cool as their house or apartment. So it's all these simple things that people don't always think about. You really just need to stop and think for a moment. Is this cool? Is there enough airflow? These things are really important. They're really simple, but they're really important.
And as the founder of your own business, Ice Queens, tell us what thermal imaging reveals that actually owners often miss with their own horses.
They show the temperature in the back of the eye. It's a non-invasive way of being able to see what's going on temperature-wise with the horse in the muscles by being able to stand back and being non-invasive. It's super accurate with the cameras that we use. They're really finely tuned. And it's so informative. It's absolutely fascinating.
And for those wondering, when would it be appropriate to use the thermal imaging on a horse? In what scenario would you need to do that?
We tend to use the thermal imaging for our own interest, really. At large sort of FEI events, obviously they're used by the FEI stewards and FEI vets. My colleague Helen Reynolds is a trained FEI thermographer, so we use it out of our own point of interest for our own research purposes and data gathering. But it's really interesting to see how the horses adjust to the weather conditions and the temperatures, how they finish after the competitions, how they cool down, how they react to the cooling, and then how we can sort of work with that information and then tweak our cooling procedures going forward.
And you've got to talk us through, mentioning competition horses, how do Olympic pros keep their horses cool in the extreme heats that they're competing in?
They are absolute pros. So they would have acclimatised their horses already as to what time of day they are competing. They would roughly know in advance what time their competition times are. So they would have acclimatised their horses and worked their horses according to those conditions in the lead up to that event. So they would already be acclimatised. They would work them for shorter periods of time. They would be cooled down regularly. They would probably, instead of working in a block of, say, 45 minutes, they would probably do 3 15-minute blocks of work instead. They would probably cool down after each 15-minute block. There would always be fresh drinking water available for the horses. There would generally be cooling stations on hand at each working in point, always at the entrance to the field of play as well. Plentiful cooling stations. The grooms are super switched on for cooling. Everyone's very adjustable with their working in. They are proper pros at that.
And I don't know if you saw, it was quite interesting this summer, but the racing industry came under quite a lot of criticism online this summer when one of the official vets spoke to camera about the horses being acclimatised to the heat waves when the journalist asked them, when racing horses are famously worked at 6 a.m. at the coolest part of the day in, day out. And I wanted to talk to you about that acclimatisation process. How long does it actually take a horse to get used to working in the heat of the sun, if traditionally they're not usually worked at that time of day?
Generally, they say sort of 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow, that's quite quick, isn't it? They're very adaptable.
But it can vary, but it depends the level of work they're in, what conditions obviously you're starting with and what conditions you're aiming to go and compete at.
I guess every horse is different as well, Emma. That must be a battle.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's not a one size fits all. Some horses will acclimatise quicker than others. You know, I know when horses were in work acclimatising for going out to Tokyo, there was sort of a guidance for their training and acclimatisation. But I know some horses took a bit longer. Some horses actually acclimatised quicker. So it just, you know, you have to take it day by day and see how the horse feels, see how their work progresses. Every animal is individual at the end of the day, and you have to work with what you've got.
Are some horses and breeds hotter than others, if you know what I mean?
There can be, yes. Your warm bloods can be a little bit. Sometimes you go back to them being sort of your older horses can obviously feel the heat more. Your slightly overweight horses can. Typically, your dark coloured horses obviously can be susceptible to the heat more than your lighter coloured horses. Actually, young stock can feel the heat, can feel the effects of the heat quicker than sort of your middle-aged horses as well. So again, it's knowing your horse to start with, knowing how, you know, what's normal for your horse, and then knowing when your horse is a little bit quiet or withdrawn, just not quite their self, and being keyed into that to start with and going, we're not quite right today. What's going on here?
And us curious equestrians aren't all Olympic athletes or professional eventers. What should we do DIY style at home in terms of keeping our everyday horses, whether it's amateur eventing, whether it's leisure riding and happy hacking, or in-hand work and groundwork? What should we be doing to keep our horses cool in these 30-degree heat waves that we just keep being hit by?
Okay, so first and foremost, plentiful fresh, clean water. In weather like this at the moment, a horse can increase its water consumption by 50%. So it's really, really important that, it's really, really important that plentiful supply of fresh, clean water is always available. Some people like to also offer a bucket of water that's got, say, a little bit of apple juice or something mixed in with it, just as a bit of extra encouragement, which is absolutely fine, but always make sure there is also fresh, clean water, as well as, a bucket of water that's got a little bit of apple juice in. Always make sure that there's a salt lick available for them to replenish the salt that they sweat out, especially when it's sort of 30 degrees at the moment. Do feed electrolytes replacement. They do sweat out a lot of electrolytes. They naturally pass electrolytes anyway in their urine and in their feces, but they sweat out extra when it's weather like this anyway. So find a good electrolytes to feed and feed it to the manufacturer's recommended dose for the weight of your horse. You can do really good hose downs with your horse to keep them comfortable. You can do that 2, 3, 4 times a day when it's weather like this. Thoroughly soak them. They will love you for that. Get them really nice and wet. Don't scrape, leave them to drip dry, put them back out. They will love that. You can also, if they wear a fly rug, you can also dunk their fly rug in a cold bucket of water and then put their fly rug on them, wet, pop them out with that on, let it drip dry on them, let it evaporate. That will keep them cool for longer. They will love that too. That will be absolutely fine. Make sure, as I've said before, that there is shade in their field. Go out into their field several times during the day to make sure that as the sun moves around, there is actually shade from that tree that's in the field or from the hedges there, that actually they do have shade all the time. Whether they choose to use it or not is up to them, but do make sure that they have shade to use if they decide to use it. If you want to bring them in during the day, please just make sure that you check the temperature of your stable on the inside. I've been into a couple of stables before early afternoon, and it has been a lot hotter inside than what you would imagine it would be. So please make sure you check that. If your horse is nice and comfortable in a stable in the day, lovely. Make sure you've got nice airflow, good ventilation. Make sure there's plentiful amounts of water in there. Access to a salt lick again. Other things you can do is soaked hay net, so they're getting refreshment from that as well. And you can do soaked hay on the floor out in the field as well, because I don't know about you, but certainly the fields down here at the moment are really parched. So there's certainly no moisture in the little grass that we have here at the moment. So we're having to feed hay out here at the moment. We are putting it out really quite wet. So again, they're able to get moisture from that as well. So, we're sort of trying to come up with innovative ideas to get the moisture there and get it into them and keep them cool.
Some fabulous tips there. And do you find, Emma, obviously owning horses, whatever we do with our horses, there's so much to think about, isn't there, all the time with the management of our equines? Do you find that it is almost like the last thing we think about? We get into summer and then suddenly it's a bit of a panic because we're not geared up for these kind of temperatures?
Yes, definitely. But kind of, as you say, we're on our, a fourth heat wave now. And you do kind of think, oh, crumbs, this is really becoming the norm now, isn't it? So, you do kind of feel caught out to start with. But at the same time, you do think, gosh, this really is starting to become the normal, isn't it?
Have you seen that increase in interest in your expertise of people coming to you almost like, help me with my horses because of this extreme weather?
Yeah, absolutely. So much more prevalent now, the interest and the inquiries that we're getting. Whereas before, not that the interest hasn't been there, but it's not been as relevant as what it is now, definitely.
You must have seen such a leap in increase over the last few years.
Definitely.
And Emma, I've got to ask you very quickly, when we're picking your brains for top tips, you mentioned lots of clean water. Now, we all have troughs, whether we have to fill them up ourselves or whether they're self-filling troughs. How often should we be cleaning them out? And also, is all algae good algae? And should we be scrubbing that off and sort of disinfecting? How natural should we be leaving our troughs?
The way that I look at it is that I would really only want my horses to drink water that I would be happy to drink. So whether that's out of a bucket or out of a water trough. My water buckets get scrubbed daily. Water troughs, I would realistically probably say, depending on the size of the water trough and how many horses you've got drinking out of it, I would say probably weekly to every 10 days, emptying it, scrubbing it out and refilling it. I think the thing with water troughs is that you have a lot of birds that come down, sit on the edge of it, drop seeds in it, grit in it, stones, there's fecal matter from the birds as well. You know, horses invariably eat over it with, you know, mouthfuls of grass and everything that goes in it as well. So I think leaving it for any more than 10 days or so is just going to get grubby, dirty. And I stand there and look at it and I think, I wouldn't really want to drink out of that. So I think sort of a week to 10 days is plentiful, really. Empty it out, give it a good scrub and a clean.
And we've talked about keeping our horses cool in these temperatures, but inevitably when working horses, there are going to sometimes be some quite dramatic emergencies. Can you first of all talk us through, Emma, the key signs and symptoms of a horse that is actually overheating?
So flared nostrils, obviously excess sweating, shaking. You can get ataxia when they're quite severe, when they are unsteady on their legs and when they are unstable and unsteady on their hind legs especially. That is really quite a concern. When you see any of those signs, you need to act quickly, start aggressive calling and get on the phone to the vet. So those would be my major points to really be very wary of. Once you cross your finish line or you finish your round of show jumping or whatever, pop off, undo your girth, find your cooling area. So whether they've got a big water trough just outside your finish line or your working in area or wherever it is, hopefully you've got a groom or your mum or dad there or someone with your bucket and sponge. Pop your saddle off, take your bridle off, pop your head collar on, get that bucket and sponge and start really giving them a good sponge off. If they've got a big water trough there, then use your bucket and throw lots of buckets of water over them. Be generous with the amounts of water you use, especially if they're really quite warm as well. Don't hold back. I was going to ask, how many buckets is too many buckets, Emma? Is it constant, just keep going until the horse is sort of calming down? Absolutely, yeah. Look at the horse that you've got in front of you. You have to wait until that horse's breathing starts to settle down and feel the temperature of the water that is coming off. You want that temperature of the water coming off to be the same temperature that it is going on. So really, the water is taking the heat out from the horse. The temperature of the water going on is 15 degrees. But the temperature of the water coming off is a lot hotter because it is drawing the heat out of the horse. Once that horse has cooled down, if the temperature of the water is going on at 15 degrees and the temperature of the water coming off is 15 degrees, then you know the horse has cooled down. And what can happen, not to scaremonger anyone, Emma, but just for our own knowledge, what can happen if you don't act quickly enough in an overheating emergency? So your horse can actually get heat stroke. It can end up in quite a pickle. You can get severe muscle damage, and in very rare cases, it can actually be fatal. So you do actually need to take this very seriously. But be sensible with your riding. Know where your cooling station is at the end of your event. Untack as soon as you've finished. Get your bucket out, get your sponge out, and start calling. And don't stop until your horse is settled with his breathing and cooled down. Don't just think that, 2 buckets of water and a quick sponge down and that'll do. If your horse is still blowing and still really hot and think, oh, well, I've used 3 buckets of water and that's normally fine, and then you walk away, but your horse is still sweating, your horse needs longer. In some instances, your horse can take 10 to 15 minutes to cool down. So if that's what it's going to take, that's what it's going to take. Don't worry, just keep going.
And I guess it is all about opening up the conversation as well amongst the equestrian field and the industry to talk more about this, whatever level we're at, whether it's leisure, amateur, professional, to make sure that it doesn't get to that stage, whether it's in local competitions or something more global.
Oh, absolutely. And across all disciplines as well, not just sort of eventing. It's really important to get it across all disciplines and all sports.
And I guess our horses who are unridden in the field, those that are companions, they are at risk as well if, as you say, they're in fields without hedges or shelters. And actually, they might be the last horse at the yard that might be tended to because others might be more demanding or in a higher workload. What would you say, Emma, to those who are struggling with restrictive facilities? Because, of course, we aren't all on plush yards with beautiful arenas and perfect hedgerows and amazing facilities with shelters and stone stables. For those who are doing a more DIY setup and who don't have the hedges as you described and who don't have a field shelter, is there anything you can recommend that you can sort of fasten together and make a DIY setup to get that horse cooler in the field so it has access to grazing in the heat of the day?
It is a tricky one. I know I've got a couple of clients that have got some retired thoroughbreds, some aged retired thoroughbreds, and I went out to check them the other day and it was really warm, and a couple of them were really quite tacky to touch, sweaty, tacky to touch. So they were obviously struggling in the heat. And at that point, it's sort of like, gosh, you need to come in to, I want to bring you in to put you under the hose for 10 minutes to cool you down. So if that was someone else in that scenario and they had very limited facilities, I think what I would probably do would, get some water and, give them a sponge off, give them a sponge off and refresh the horse to start with. And then I think what I would try and suggest is, in some shape or form, try and rig something so you can at least try and offer some shade for that horse. Whether they can construct just something to offer shade. It doesn't have to be very big. And then whether the horse chooses to use that option or not, horses are a law unto themselves at the end of the day. But, at least they have that option then to use it if they desire.
Interesting, you mentioned that rigging things up because, myself and my mum, we've had various sole use facilities over the years that we've rented for our horses. And sometimes that comes with a stable block and sometimes it doesn't. And when we were out on a marshland at one point, we had acres and acres, but we didn't have any trees, which was absolutely frustrating. Coming from another place where we'd had lovely sort of woodland that they could all go and shelter in. So we one summer got stakes in the ground and sort of bashed in these wooden stakes, and we makeshifted a big gazebo. We bought the sort of gazebo material off of Amazon and sort of together managed to rig up this very makeshift setup that I'm sure would have raised eyes, in the local area, but actually needs must when you love your animals. And sort of people were asking what we were doing. And actually sometimes you have to be a bit brave, don't you, for fear of judgment as well in the sort of equestrian world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you engage in conversation with your field neighbours and explain that actually it's genuinely for the welfare of my horse and have that conversation, people will go, yes, of course, why didn't, I totally understand and whatever. But yeah, I think if you're able to construct something, even if it's just some wooden stakes and a bit of tarpaulin or something, just enough to create a large enough area for your horse to be able to get their whole body into a shaded area, it doesn't really need to be any bigger than that, then it's something to get them out of the strongest midday sun, then that is something, definitely.
And whether we're, as you say, eventing or we're happy hacking, when should we avoid exercising? Obviously, we all know the heat of the day, the midday sun, but should it be that in a heat wave, we shouldn't ride or exercise or do groundwork at all?
Do you know what? You just need to be sensible and use your common sense, really. Early mornings and later evenings really are the coolest times of day. So really best to work your horse, whether it's on the ground or ridden, early mornings or later evenings. Personally, I wouldn't really do any exercise from sort of 11 o'clock in the morning to about 4:30ish in the afternoon. In temperatures like this at the moment, it's stifling in that period of time. I personally would leave them be in that period of time.
Emma, I've got to ask you, in your work, how do you deal with the responsibility of looking after elite and VIP horses? Because the thought of that terrifies me. How do you deal with that pressure?
Well,
it's scary enough looking after a friend's horse.
Yeah, it was a bit terrifying to start with, but they're just horses like everyone else's. And the thing is, they all come with their grooms. So, you know, where there's a horse, there's a groom. So sort of the pressure and the responsibility is there, but actually it's also shared with the groom as well. So, you know, we generally get on really well with the grooms. There's good banter there. So it's always a shared responsibility between us and the grooms. And we've been around the block a few times now, and it's always great to see them. Yeah, there's a huge amount of pressure to get it right. It's great, and we can let our hair down once the competition is over, because it's like, yes, we done it and we got it right.
And it's actually, I mean, how fundamental is it that you get on with the grooms? You say you all have banter. Along come the horses, but you've got to get along with the horses' people, haven't you?
Absolutely. It's a team effort, 100%. So it's not just getting on with the grooms, it's getting on with the riders, the physios, the farriers, the owners, the chef de keeps, the vets, everyone. It is a village that is behind the rider and the horse. It really is. So, yeah, it is just one big team. I am still not quite sure how I managed to get into it, but I'm so incredibly lucky that I did, and forever grateful for what I do and for the experiences that I have.
Well, Emma, I'm going to make you answer that question now, because my next question is, where did your passion for cooling horses down in the heat come from?
I think my passion was honed when I was out in Tokyo Olympics. I met my now fellow colleague, Helen Reynolds. She was out there doing the thermography out there. And I was out in Tokyo Olympics as the role of forge manager over there. So that was my third Olympics, being forge manager. Helen and I worked alongside each other and really hit it off. And that was where my interest was really peaked in equine cooling and thermography. We just, really lit a spark between us. We sort of formed a bit of an alliance there and came back to England and went on and formed Ice Queens, and have been out and done World Equestrian Games in Italy and done the European Championships in France. I went out and done Po 5-star in France. So, and some exciting plans coming up as well. So, it's been great.
Wow, and I guess being behind the scenes, you know, as you mentioned, forge manager, realising the importance of a horse's temperature and their performance, not only obviously for their health and avoiding any emergencies, but also for their peak performance.
Oh, absolutely. Their well-being and their performance is everything, really. And everything sort of has to sit together and fall into place. And if there's something that's not quite right, then you're not going to get your peak performance. So it is a fine balance, and a horse is a finely tuned animal. Whether it's a retired horse that's in the field, a pony club pony, a show jumping cob, or an Olympic eventer, they're all the same at the end of the day. So it's a fine balance to get everything right.
With heat waves on the increase, as we've mentioned, Emma, what do you think the future of horse ownership and horse competition is going to look like with the sort of trajectory we're currently on?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I think it concerns me. I think a lot of people have still got to come around to the idea that this is actually happening. Some people are already sort of accepting it, but it's surprising how many people haven't quite got there yet, and how many event directors and organisers maybe have it on the periphery but don't have it as a priority at the moment. So there's a lot of awareness and education that needs to be put out there. Myself and Helen are really keen to try and push that and assist with that as much as possible. And I think things will probably have to change and be more encompassing and more adaptable as well. Climate-wise, I don't know how things will proceed with the climate, whether it will be the norm that we get 4 or 5 heat waves a year, or whether, because these heat waves that we've had at the moment have been fairly short and sharp, haven't they? They've lasted for 5, 6, 7 days at a time, and then they've lessened, and then they've come back again, and then they've lessened. Whether they'll become longer or not, I don't know. I think as time goes on, maybe horse owners will start to question whether it's actually worth going and competing, or actually, no, it's going to be too hot and I don't think it's worth risking the welfare of my horse of actually putting them in a lorry and travelling them and going to the event. Things like being aware of how hard the ground is as well. I don't know about you, but the ground down here is dried out so much, it's been absolutely rock solid. So, you know, taking those things into consideration as well.
I mean, listening to what you were saying there, Emma, and thinking, you know, I follow a lot of equestrian YouTubers at different levels in competition, and a lot of the amateur eventers saying, I'm not taking my horses to competition this week. We're actually going to go on a beach ride because the ground's too hard at the competition, and my horse, I'm not putting my horse through it. And actually, you know, seeing that change where, you know, watching them for years, their content has always been competition after competition. And now we're seeing them vlogging their beach rides instead, and actually thinking, good for you. You're putting your horse first over one, you know, over the competition day, but also over the content making as well.
Absolutely. In fairness, I did actually see a couple of competition venues cancel their little one-day events because the temperature was meant to be 32 degrees or something that day. They actually cancelled their event because of the really high temperatures. And I thought, I'm not actually sure I've seen an event cancelled due to the high heat before. And I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision at all for the event organisers. And I thought, absolutely hats off to you. And I'm sure if that event had gone ahead, people still would have travelled and would have gone and competed. But, you know, it would have meant travelling your horse in a, you know, on a hot day in a hot lorry. So, yeah, there's so many elements to take into question now. So, yeah, lots of questions. And of course,
that's another whole aspect to cooling horses. We've talked about it in our field, on our yards at competitions, but actually travelling our horses. Now, some horse boxes and lorries have lovely, wonderful fans, don't they, to keep horses cool. But for those who don't, I imagine there's a whole plans and preparations that have to be taken into account with horses on the road as well.
Yeah, so travelling in hot weather, you definitely need to be really careful travelling in hot weather. If your vehicle is not sort of temperature controlled, you shouldn't travel. Your government guidelines is that you shouldn't travel any animals in 30-degree temperature or over. So first thing is, if you are going to travel, it's like exercising your horse. Do it early in the morning or late in the evening, the coolest part of the day. Don't travel lunchtime, early afternoon. You do not want to encounter traffic jams, accident, breakdown, or anything in the midday sun. And with the possibility of being stuck on the roadside for hours, especially if you've got a horse on board, that could take hours and hours for a replacement vehicle to come and sort you out. You absolutely do not want that. So if you do have to travel, make sure you have plentiful supply of fresh water with you. You want to be able to have the opportunity to offer your horse a drink when you are travelling. So dependent on how far you have to travel, either work in a break area where you can stop and offer your horse a drink. If you normally take a container with you for water for travelling, take 2. You really need to double up on the amount of water you take with you. Any ventilation windows you have, make sure that they are working and that you can open them safely to their maximum capacity, so there is really good airflow there. If you have fans in your lorries or trailers, then make sure that they work. On Amazon, you can also get some clip-on fans as well, so you can have a look at those. Obviously, place them safely and appropriately so they don't fall down, but it will just aid with the airflow. Really, you've got to question if you really need to travel in sort of 28-degree heat to start with. Can you postpone it to another time or at a cooler part of the day? Unless it's for a vet visit, is this something that you can do at another time, at a more sensible time and cooler part of the day, really?
Actually, really interesting what you were saying, Emma, in terms of I'd thought about a future of hotter summers and competitors taking their horses elsewhere, as we've already mentioned, off to the beach or out, hacking instead of going to a competition. But also, actually, I hadn't thought of the fact that competitions themselves may be cancelled and event organisers making that difficult decision to cancel their events. And actually, we could be looking forward at a future where more and more events are cancelled in those circumstances, particularly with that government recommendation that horses shouldn't be travelled over 30 degrees.
Yeah. Government guidelines state that no animal should be travelled in 30 degrees or over if the vehicle is not temperature controlled.
And that's going to have a big impact, isn't it, on the industry if competitions are regularly cancelled and can't go ahead?
Absolutely.
Did you ever foresee, Emma, I imagine you went into this with a love and a passion and seeing that need, as you mentioned, in the Olympics and that fascination of cooling horses down. But did you ever foresee actually the greater need that was going to be there and waiting for you because of the increase in temperatures and climate change and global warming?
I think when Helen and I started Ice Queens in 2021, and obviously the trajectory for global warming was already there. We already knew that there was a need for education for equine cooling and that there was an opportunity there for us to educate and get the word out and to be hands-on with horse owners, event organisers, and hopefully to be able to make a positive difference. And going forwards, hopefully that's what we're able to do. Here we are 4 years down the line and 4 heat waves into 2025 already, and crazy, isn't it?
I know, and I cannot do, you're talking to someone, Emma, who I need to be personally cooled down on a daily basis. I cannot stand the heat. And I'm looking at getting one of those neck fans. The horses cope better than I do. I cannot stand it, particularly when you're poo picking or mucking out with the humid temperatures and you just cannot breathe. So I really feel for us as horse people and for those working outdoors in these conditions and for our horses, as we all seem to be on the rise every summer and dealing with this, because most of us didn't sign up to horses in these hot heatwave temperatures, and it's something that we just have to put up with as horse lovers, as part of the long list of things we have to consider as horse enthusiasts.
It's another weather extreme, isn't it? From
another one.
And the wind and the freezing mud and gales of the winter to now the extreme sun and everything else in the summer.
And I don't know about you, but we've had horses. Exactly, for the love of horses, and we've had heat waves and then into biblical torrential rain thunderstorms, which is just it just feels unbelievable to be 1 minute you're throwing off your as many layers as you can at the yard and the next minute you're running for shelter.
I know. And yet here we are, we still plod on, don't we?
We do. We refuse to give up, don't we? And we can't give up when we love our horses. Emma, are there any other recommendations that you can put forward for us for keeping horses in your care in the best condition?
Absolutely. So feeding good quality forage is a really good basic one, and also a good quality bedding to keep them on as well. Gower Granary particularly provide a really good range of bedding products and forage as well, sustainably produced down on the Gower Peninsula. So that's a really lovely local Welsh farming family there supporting British farming. I was always a shavings loyalist before I moved on to the mill chopped straw. I really love it. The horses that I work with really love it as well. And it's just really clean and really light. So that's fabulous.
Well, Emma, thank you for all your top tips throughout the episode. Before you go, you mentioned that need to educate when you started Ice Queens back in 2021. And I'm just wondering where your inner passion and fire comes from in terms of education and raising awareness with horses.
I have always had this little thing inside me from when I was a child that I've always wanted a pony and I've always been into horses. I'm the only one in my family that have been horse and pony mad. I didn't grow up with a pony in a field next to me or a pony down the road. There was no one else in my family that was horsey or anything at all. It was only me. So I left school when I was 16 and I moved away from the Channel Islands and came over to England to do my BHS exams. And so I've always had this horse passion. I got my qualifications and became a riding instructor when I was 18.
And Emma, how do you feel? I mean, I feel proud hearing about your story, but how do you feel as someone who has grafted for their passion of horses? You know, you haven't had horses land on your lap and you have ended up in top competition and in the Olympic world, surrounded by those who will have had horses in their families for generations. And yet you have gone after that dream yourself and grafted, you know, from the bottom up. How do you feel sort of looking back at your equestrian journey?
You'll get me all choked up. I feel really chuffed, actually. It's been really tough. I've done it all on my own and all off my own back. I won the Equestrian Business Awards Groom of the Year title back in 2023. I'm a self-employed freelance groom. I started my own business, Elite Equine Care, in 2022, but I've been working in and around the equestrian world since I left school when I was 16. I've had no real financial backing from my parents or anything since I left school. So if there's something I wanted to do or something I've wanted, I've had to go out and earn it and do it all on my own. So it's been sort of a school of hard knocks, but I'm really proud by the way I've done it and so proud by what I've achieved. And to sit here and to think that I've done 4 Olympics and 2 World Equestrian Games and European Championships and got my Groom of the Year title and everything I'm really, really chuffed.
Proof that you can do it when you're not born into it as well.
I'm not one to big up myself, but it's been blimmin' hard work, don't get me wrong. And there's been some days when it's been howling a gale, freezing cold, covered in muds and pitch dark and questioning my life choices at times. But I'm like, I wouldn't really change it. Now on this new journey with Ice Queens and love horses.
And proof that you can do it without horses being gifted to you in the family or for landing into a horsey family, as so many are. So great to hear voices like yours, Emma, where you've really fought for your passion.
Absolutely. You know, I've only ever had 2 horses in my life. My first horse I bought when I was 21. My second horse I bought for £1. I sadly lost him in 2019. So I'm horseless at the moment, but I look after everyone else's horses and I'm fulfilled in that form at the moment. I'm quite happy with what I do.
You get your fix at the Olympics and the Equestrian Games.
My fix from looking after everyone else's horses at the moment. I don't feel I'm missing out too much, really. So I'm quite happy on that. And I'm very fortunate with what I've been able to do and experience. And I am proud of myself. I don't say it very often.
And you should. Emma, thank you so much for coming on Curious Equestrian. It's been so inspiring. And thank you for all your wealth of knowledge and tips and tricks that we'll be all using in the heatwave. You're going to stick around and come behind the scenes and answer some listener questions. So for those listening and watching, please join our membership zone and you'll gain access to the final part of the interview. But for now, Emma, how can those who want to find out more find you and Ice Queens?
So you can go onto my social media, which is Elite Equine Care I have a Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. And I also have the Ice Queens, which is Facebook and Instagram as well. And also have websites for Elite Equine Care and Ice Queens.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way, or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners.